Today on the Servant Leadership Podcast, we're joined by Steve Preston, a leader who has served at the highest levels of both business and government, and now leads Goodwill Industries International. Steve has been an investment banker, a Fortune 500 CFO, and a senior government official, serving as administrator of the Small Business Administration and Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Today, he oversees one of the largest nonprofit networks in North America, focused on helping people find dignity and opportunity through work. In this episode, Steve shares how he's navigated some of the toughest leadership challenges of his career, from turning around federal agencies in crisis to transforming workplace culture, and how servant leadership guides every decision he makes. If you're passionate about using your influence to make a difference, this conversation is for you.
Steve, thank you for joining us on the Servant Leadership Podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
When I first heard your background, I could not believe all of the experience you've had, both in the private and public sector. And now you're leading Goodwill. Talk about the journey professionally that you've had, because it's unbelievable.
Well, I started out in a relatively conventional way. I went to got an MBA with a specialization in finance, and after that, I went to New York as an investment banker. I was mostly focused on doing something that I loved and where I'd learn and grow a lot. And so New York and the world of banking was kind of a whole new world for me. And it really kind of launched me in life in a lot of important ways. After being in that role for a number of years, I decided that I wanted to learn how to grow as a leader. I wanted to have a different kind of engagement. And I thought my clients were having more fun than I was. And so I left banking and I went into the corporate side and ultimately became the CFO of a large company called ServiceMaster, which had about 9 different companies. After that, I went through a time of real discernment where I felt like I wanted to have a different kind of impact in life, and that led me into the federal government, where I ran 2 agencies. I was the administrator of the Small Business Administration, and I was the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. And both of those were in times of big crisis, where both of those agencies were in the middle of those crises. I left there, I went back into the private sector. I ran a couple of companies, and then after the second company was when I, for a number of reasons, decided that I wanted to, again, have a different kind of impact in life, and ended up at Goodwill as a result. And it was very much, that decision was very much tied to the mission of Goodwill and a cause that was on my heart very strongly.
Wow. So you've led in some of the largest private companies in the world. Most people would set out to achieve that and kind of just stay there forever because it's their dream job, especially CFO of a company like ServiceMaster and other companies who were involved in. What was it like, and what was really the driver that led you to even think about doing something else?
Early in my career, I learned pretty quickly that all that glitters isn't gold, right? I worked on Wall Street. Back then, the Wall Street firms were much smaller. They were very flat. We got to know all the leadership. It's sort of, when you have sort of broader personal goals in life, or you're driven by a lot of different things, you realize that you look more broadly at your life. Let me just get a little bit more specific. When I was at Lehman, obviously the world of investment banking in New York, there's a certain ethos around it, and there are a lot of great people in that profession, but it was, there was a big golden purse. Once you got to the partner level, you had a lot of influence. It was very prestigious, and being up close to those motivators early in life was very good for me, because it helped me understand that those were kind of thin, right? That those weren't going to give me the things in life that I was hoping to get out of my life. And so when I had the opportunities later, I had 2 different situations where I was sort of the CEO, heir apparent in a couple of very large organizations. It was easy for me to walk away from those, similarly to how I walked away from Lehman, for things that I felt I was being called to, where I could have a different kind of impact, And as a result, I never really looked back. And those were great decisions. But you have to kind of be grounded in what you think is important in life and the kind of impact that you want to have.
So when you jumped into the public sector then, you jumped into absolute crisis and really were the turnaround person to come in and help lead through unbelievable uncertainty. Talk about what it was like first with the SBA and then where it went from there.
Yeah, so at the SBA is the agency of the federal government that makes loans to homeowners, not just businesses, homeowners as well as businesses who have lost their facilities or their businesses in a natural disaster. And I came in about 10 months after Katrina, and very little of the capital from that loan program had begun flowing into the Gulf. And as a result, there were just hundreds of thousands of people who were backed up in their ability to get their lives back. And so I'd come out of the private sector. I'd never had a public job like that before. It was a whole new thing, jumping into the public eye and seeing articles about myself in magazines that were completely untrue, where I hadn't even started the job yet. It was crazy. It was actually a good initiation, and it was. And the SBA was very much in the media. Yeah, really the only, I hate to say it this way, but the saving grace for the SBA was that FEMA was getting even more attention for the response. So that was very difficult. The agency had the lowest morale of any federal agency in the federal government based on the surveys that they do. People in Congress were calling for my predecessor's resignation. The press was terrible. So it was a very, it was sort of an entry from a place of relative safety, as a CFO of a large company, and then later as a senior operating leader, to a place of complete vulnerability. And so, it was really sort of. It was shocking in a lot of ways, but I think the other thing it did was it invoked every part of me as a leader. I mean, I knew what I had to be in that place pretty quickly. I knew that I had to be a certain type of leader for the people because of the morale issues and because of the poor performance issues and because of the media. So the people were very much impacted personally because many of them their lives were about succeeding in this mission, and they were failing, and they wanted to be there for Americans in need, and they couldn't because operationally the organization was really had just almost collapsed in a lot of ways. So you had to be there for the people. You had to be I had to be a public face in the midst of this challenge almost immediately. I had to be, manage stakeholder relationships on both sides of the aisle in Congress. Obviously, there are expectations from the White House, but most of all, traveling through the Gulf and talking to people in need and seeing how their lives had been affected. Many of them had lost loved ones. Many of them had not been in their homes for 10 months. That was, without a question, the most striking factor, the most motivating factor for me when I came in, because I'd never had a job or never had a role where the outcome of my work was that directly essential to people's lives. And so it was pretty easy to wake up every day and saying, look, I've got to be on my game now. I have to be focused on being the best in every possible way in all of these spheres now. And so it was just a very sharp call across the spectrum of what I needed to do.
Well, you talk about jumping into a role that probably most people wouldn't want to jump into, given the difficulty at hand. And one of the things I've heard from a number of people is your ability to lead well is extraordinary. It's just people talk so highly of you. We talk a lot about servant leadership on this podcast. How did you think about servant leadership at all, or just how to lead in that type of environment, stepping into, just like you talk about, a team with low morale and maybe not getting the results that anyone wanted?
Yeah. So I think as a person in a role like that, and truly any leader, I've learned that you have to know what your mission is, believe in that mission, and believe that kind of like, you've been placed on earth to advance that mission. And then that mission needs to animate all that you do, right? You need, and if you do that well, you need to engage every gift, every competency, every morsel of energy you have in service to that mission. And I believe when you do that, the best of what you have to give as a leader comes out. It comes out almost naturally because you're so engaged and you're so focused on all of the different things that need to happen to be successful. You really do find yourself really, I guess, just once again, giving the best that you have in every realm. In a crisis like this, or in times of great change, people need clear, decisive leadership that they can trust. Now, they don't expect all the answers. They don't expect you to know everything. They don't expect perfection, but they need to know that the leader has his or her hands firmly on the wheel, that once again, they're completely committed to the mission. It's not about them, it's about the mission. And also that they will be their advocate and supporter through the storm. And that was very important through the SBA. People in the agency would read my comments in the press. And if I was advocating for them, it was really important for them to see that. I think the other thing is, especially in a crisis, is it's really important to speak honestly about the severity of the issues. Because when you do that, you gain credibility and you focus everybody on solutions. I think one of the worst things you could do is downplay the severity of a situation. People have to know that you get it. And if you get it, and if you state honestly that you get it, they understand that you're committing yourself to fix it. Now, both of those things, committing to the mission and committing to your leadership role within that mission, focuses on something that's bigger than you. And when you take your eyes off yourself, I think you have a much, much better ability to stay above the fray. I would just say, especially in public roles, you're often subjected to some really bad things. I mean, other than just the risk and fear of failure, you can become subject to very personal attacks, very difficult attacks. Some of them are completely untrue. Those are very difficult situations when you're in a public or sort of quasi-public situation. But those situations have consistently sharpened my view of who I need to be as a leader. And they've often strengthened my resolve, ironically, to stand strong. And they've also helped me affirm the importance of being somebody who needs to be accountable again and again to something that's bigger than myself. And when you can keep your eye on the bigger mission, all of those secondary things kind of fall away to the degree that it's possible, because you're holding on to something bigger.
In your role at the SBA, people from both sides of the aisle talked extremely highly of you, maybe after the fact, maybe not in the midst of it, but after the fact, people really liked the work you did. And you got thrown into another, even tougher role, I'd say, right after that, serving as the Secretary for Housing and Urban Development. Was that a change you saw coming, or was that thrown at you, or why did you even decide to make that jump?
Well, so a couple of things. First of all, I did actually, people on the other side of the aisle did come out and support me for the HUD job. It's one of the reasons I got confirmed so quickly, and I was confirmed unanimously. John Kerry was the head of my oversight committee in the Senate. Dick Durbin was the head of my appropriations committee in the Senate, and both of them went to Senate leadership at the time, which was Democrat, and said, please get him confirmed quickly. And it was just a tremendous bit of gratitude that I had. And I was very different from both of them politically. They knew from a policy perspective I had very different views, but we always worked with their people very closely when we were addressing these things. So that's number one. Number two, I was not a traditional choice for HUD secretary. I didn't have a poverty housing background. It really wasn't a lot of the unique programs that HUD had were not things that I was particularly familiar with, but I sort of checked some very unique boxes, and as a result, I was sort of a square peg for a square hole at that point in time, because the housing crisis was exploding. The housing crisis was very much about the mortgage market. Well, I had been an investment banker for many years, and I'd been a CFO. So the whole idea of mortgages and securitizations and how those were sold in the market, and the credit risks and the risks to the market, all of those were the kinds of things that I did have a background in. So as a result, I stepped into that. Number two is I had just run an agency in crisis, in national crisis. And so I had been tested in my work as somebody who drove deep change, operational change at the SBA. We really restructured all the processes. We improved technology. We really kind of turned the place upside down to get to a place where we were performing well. So I'd had this experience getting my hands dirty in a federal agency with all kinds of challenges and difficulties. And then the third piece was I'd had to do a lot of media, frankly. I'd had to be a public person representing the administration and being able to talk about the issues, the need, how to address those issues, and how to be in the middle of working groups across stakeholders to bring forward solutions. So it was, for that point in time, it was something that I had sort of been battle tested on in a number of fronts, and frankly, I was known to Congress and I was known to the administration. All of that worked well.
After that period of serving, you became an advisor and a mentor to so many other people. And at some point, this opportunity of Goodwill came along. And one of the things I find really interesting is just you would have had a really unique perspective now, having gone through all of basically that 06 to 2010 timeframe, serving people who really probably had been benefiting from Goodwill. I know a lot more, but you just had a really unique view. So what interested you about the role at Goodwill and its mission and what they were doing?
Yeah, that's an interesting connection point. The end recipients of some of those services are probably end recipients of Goodwill services. So this is something that was embedded in me for many years. When I was a young banker in New York City, single guy, I spent my weekends working with young people in tough neighborhoods, tutoring them, being a mentor to a couple of them, and then ultimately leadership of a couple of programs that served young people in those communities. And in almost all of those cases, the focus was to help those children and teens get the support they need, get the education they need, get the visibility into other possibilities that they needed to help them be able to overcome their circumstances and get on a different pathway. And it was just such, for me, it was just sort of something I loved at the time because I loved being with kids, and I came from a big family, and it was just something I loved, and that just fed my heart. And obviously, I had a deep, deep concern for those kids and wanted what was best for them. Well, fast forward 15 years, I was running the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which is really the federal agency that deals most with poverty issues. And I felt like I saw what happened to many of those kids who weren't able to break out of their circumstances. And they did end up in intergenerational poverty. They did end up in situations where they weren't able to take advantage of pathways to a different kind of future than their parents or other people in their communities had. And it really, it just impacted me greatly to see the degree of brokenness we have in our communities and sort of the degree of despair and the lack of vision that people have for what's possible in their lives, because they'd never had access, they'd never seen those pathways, they didn't have examples in their lives to help them make different kinds of decisions, whatever. And so when I came out of the federal government, and I went, and as I mentioned before, I ran a couple of companies, most of my volunteer and sort of philanthropic energies were focused on adults with various challenges in life in programs that help them move forward. And when I left the second company, I wrote a mission statement for myself. And the mission statement said something like, running a company that hires difficult to employ people so they can develop their talents and find a better pathway in life for the benefit of themselves and their communities. I should probably memorize what I wrote so I can say it in a little bit clearer way. But anyway, that's what it was. And it was really based on this huge burden I felt in my heart for those people. And I talked to some private equity firms and said, could we buy a company? What if we did this? And I realized that it was going to be a very, very difficult needle to thread. And then during that period of time, probably a little over a year later, I got a call from an executive recruiter to run Goodwill. And I didn't really know what Goodwill did. And so I said to the recruiter, I don't think I really want to do that. And it was sort of a mid-level person, and she hung up the phone, and about 2 weeks later, I got a call from the senior partner who said, actually, I've talked to you, and I think this is exactly what you want to do. And let me tell you a little bit about the mission, and I think you're just the right person for this. And I said, oh my goodness, this is it, So, and so the interesting thing about the Goodwill job is it is very much the mission that for years has weighed heavily on my heart. So it's the thing I care about so much. On the other hand, I love running organizations. I love complex business issues. That's kind of what I've done. It's the stuff of what I love to do. And so Goodwill is a big, complicated organization, right? We've got 153 local Goodwill organizations. They're all independent. I run the umbrella group that tries to support all of those organizations in any number of ways through training and curriculum and technology and funding and best practices to improve what they're doing. And it's just a really interesting job. And it just all came together for me in a way that was really powerful.
Wow. One of the things I've heard you talk about related to Goodwill, and I've read some articles, is you talk a lot about how employment can be a redemptive force, in how you're restoring dignity through work in such unique ways. Talk to our audience about why that's even important, and how as leaders, it's more than just the bottom line, and how actually other decisions can impact the bottom line in some really positive ways.
Yeah. Well, so we all focus on economic mobility and resources sort of at the outset because about 84% of the people that we serve have a high school degree or less. Many of them are very low income individuals, and helping them get on a different pathway financially means a lot for them, their families, and broadly even for the communities they live in. So that we do understand that, but work means so much more to people. Work is a place where we have an opportunity to be productive and to contribute our gifts and our efforts to something that's meaningful. Work is a place, very importantly, especially in our culture today, where we find community. And so many of the people that we serve don't have the right kind of community. And it's a way that you can connect with people in a meaningful way. It's also, very importantly, a place where we can develop those gifts, where we can see a different kind of future and have goals for what it would to achieve greater things. And ultimately, I think when we put all that together, it really is a critical way to advance human flourishing. And I think that's what we all want, right? That's what I want. I want to flourish in life, and I know for me, what I do in my work is really an essential component to that. There's so much in me that comes alive in this work. And when I talk to I have so many wonderful opportunities to talk to people that have been through our programs. A few weeks ago, I did 6 video interviews with people. I think 5 of them had been come through incarceration, very dark backgrounds. And when I listened to them say, this is what my life was before, this is what it meant for me to get a different vision in life and get the support each step of the way to break through all those barriers, whether they were addiction, whether they were bad behaviors, whether they were whatever, to break through those barriers and find a different vision for my life. You realize that as human beings, those people are in fundamentally different places, and the level of gratitude and hope and excitement that they have for their lives is just so palpable. And I got to tell you, those types of engagements are just absolutely fueling my tank.
I mean, Goodwill impacts many millions of people each year. I'm not sure how many people, maybe you know that, between staff and also between the customers you serve, but it's somewhere that touches people all around the world, especially here in the US. And one of the things that I'm curious about is that's a lot of pressure on you. That's pretty weighty to think that you're having an impact on the lives of millions of people. When you think through the impact you're trying to make on all of these people, what kind of weight does that carry, and how does it help you with decision making?
Yeah. So it carries with it a weight. It's sort of a blessed weight, because it's a weight that is supported by a vision of opportunity, right? And so when I look at what's possible, it carries with it a huge weight, but it also carries with it just an incredible amount of motivation and excitement about what's possible. And there are many, many impediments to getting to those places, but that's kind of what we're all here to do. The other thing I'd say is the services are delivered through 153 local organizations across US and Canada. Each one of them has a CEO, each one of them has a mission leader, and those are the people that carry the balls on the front lines. And so I'm not in this journey alone. In fact, I don't deliver any of those things. They're the ones that deliver them on the front line. And my job is to lock arms with every one of those people and do what I can do from a national level and a central level to try to bring them all the right kinds of support and technology and funding and the things to help them do the great things they do on the ground. So sometimes it can feel like a lonely place, but most of the time it feels like I have just a legion of partners. And when I look at when I think about those individuals every day and realize that those are the ones that I'm serving directly, so that they can then serve effectively the people they serve, it gives a face to pretty much everything I do.
So throughout your career, you've jumped into these roles where you're helping set a lot of strategy and helping set direction, but it's completely dependent on all the amazing leaders around you, right? Especially here with all of these local leaders having to implement, and really you listen to what they want to implement and work together on all of that. How do you build trust among teams and among leadership? And as there's so many different visions that people might have, how do you help those come to life?
Yeah, well, trust is complicated, and trust can be elusive. And so, and trust is different based on where you're building it. I think there are a couple of things. So I have my own team of direct reports that are working with me on driving a lot of these capabilities. And then I mentioned the 153 local Goodwills. There are a number of ways. I think for both groups, they need to see me out front. They need to see me leading out of the right place. And they also need to see me willing to run to the fire instead of away from it. And we have a lot of fires that we need to run into. So I need to make sure that people have confidence in who I am and how I lead, and they build trust in that. I think a really important part of that is they need to see my heart. They need to see why I lead. They need to know why I am here. People will give you a lot of grace for your imperfections, and I got a lot of them. But if they believe in your motives and why you're here, and they believe in your competency, I do believe that's important, they will line up with you. And the other thing is, I have found that people need to see you in the trenches with them. They want to know that I want them to succeed. They want to know that I have their back. They want to know that I will go to work for them. And it's really one of the first kind of epiphanies I had when I went into the federal government, because in a lot of those roles, the leaders in federal agencies are very kind of elevated in the minds of people. It's not like you walk into a room and everybody's saying, "Hi, Steve, let me high five you." I mean, like people would talk about me in the third person when I was sitting next to them in meetings. It was crazy. And I remember saying to somebody like, "I don't quite get this, right? I'm used to first names, et cetera, et cetera. Do I need to kind of own this elevated thing, or how do I do this, right?" And the advice I got was, you got to own the position, because people take confidence in the position, and they need to know that the person in the position, which is a position of power and a position of authority, owns it. But for me, it was important personally for me to go to people in a very real, productive, engaged place. So, for example, when I went into the SBA and we had to redesign all of the workflows in a really kind of, granular way, it was a lot of hard work, a lot of complicated stuff. I called a 3-day working session after doing a lot of groundwork. And people were like, "You don't need to go to it. Nobody's going to think you're going to go to it." I said, "No, are you kidding me? Like, I got to be in that room. I'm going to be doing the little yellow sticky notes for the idea panels, and I'm going to be right in the middle of it. I want to know, and B, this is what we're about as a team." So building trust, I think, requires a lot of different things. Sometimes it's specific to the audience, sometimes it's specific to the situation. But I think those are some of the elements that I've experienced. I think most strongly.
This might be a hard question, and you can take it anywhere you want. But a lot of the people listening are people who are trying to grow in their leadership capabilities, and you're giving tons of good, actionable insights that if people grasp on, there's some real golden nuggets in here. But for people who are just like, you're saying I have influence, you're saying this is how you lead, but you've been successful everywhere you've gone. How do I lead? What's the first step look like? What advice would you give somebody who's trying to really develop their leadership capabilities in their local community or in the role or leading whatever they're leading?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it's pretty easy to, give these thoughts when you've been at the top of organizations for a period of time, because it's a particular spot with a particular set of needs. I was a CFO for many years. I was even, I was the level below that for a period of time. And so I've definitely been in those positions where I've had to grapple with this issue. And now, as a leader of an organization, I know it's important for the people in those positions because they're on my teams. So I would say a number of things. Never underestimate the impact you can have. Right? Never underestimate the impact of your leadership in terms of giving a message to the people that you lead, even if you're a couple levels further down the organization, to the people that are counterparts that maybe are at the same level of you in an organization, but maybe have different jobs. Standing up for the right things, giving the right messages, leading with the right kind of behaviors is something that is infectious. People take their lead from the behaviors of other people around them. And sometimes when you're not in that top job, I think those types of leadership capabilities are even more profound. The biggest challenges I've had over the years as a leader have been when people a level or two down in the organization are not exhibiting the right values or the right behaviors or the right accountabilities. And that's where stuff starts to fall apart. Because as the leader, it's hard to get visibility. It's where organizations break. And so never underestimate the impact you can have. And never underestimate that other people see that, and that all throughout the organization, and how that will build confidence in you. So I think that's really important. The other thing I would say is look to the people above you and look to them at what they need, and put yourself in their position and say, what does that person need from me? Not just in terms of a work product or an outcome, but advice.